Hi, this is Simon Upstill and welcome to 5 things that are wrong with Apple Motion. Now, obviously there are way more than 5 things and you'll have a long list of your own, but over these 5 short videos I'll give you my 5 just to get the conversation started. My angle on this though is not about features that I'd like to have, but rather what went wrong with the original design and what Apple never got around to fixing. So it's more of a developer's take on things than a user's take, and I hope that will make it interesting. And yes, Motion is effectively obsolete, which makes this whole conversation a little bit academic, but who doesn't love a good rant? So anyway, number 1 in this series is the video timeline. My guess is that in implementing the video timeline, the original developers were looking to emulate After Effects so as to give users an environment that looked familiar. If you open up After Effects, the default layout looks pretty much like this. There's a timeline down here, which is where you add layers to build up your composition. You can throw on effects and edit them in the effects panel, but that's basically all there is to it. There's only one environment for building your composition, and that is the timeline. Now, it's quite obviously a pretty poor concept. A layer-based compositor is all about stacking layers one on top of the other. You're building your composition vertically. And to build an efficient vertical composition, you need as much vertical space on your screen as you can get. And you won't get that with After Effects, short of moving your viewer to another monitor. So, if we come back to Motion and open up a new project, you'll see that the video timeline is open by default, and it all looks a bit like After Effects. But Motion actually has a huge advantage over After Effects because you're not limited to just one space for building up your composition. You'll also have another space that is far better suited to doing it than the timeline, and that's the Layers pane. The Layers pane gives you plenty of the vertical height that you need for layer-based working, and especially if you close down the video timeline. Okay, so the timeline is open by default, but it's easy enough to close it down and forget about it until such time as you need to tweak timings, and that's really how I work. But there is, of course, no preference option to have it closed by default, and there really should be. I mean, how hard would it be to give us that? But there are 2 much more annoying issues that I'm going to come on to now. The first is that if you want to switch to player mode to see your project in the biggest window that Motion allows, and then you switch back out of player mode, the wretched timeline automatically opens back up even though you've closed it down. Why? What's the sense in that? If you closed it down, you closed it down for a very good reason. It's extremely annoying to have Motion override your workflow decision. Incidentally, while we're talking about it, why does player mode not allow you to see the output full screen? It means there's no option to see the output of Motion as it's meant to look and at its correct resolution. When I'm working in After Effects, I have my output go to my broadcast monitor where I can continuously monitor the output as I'm working, and I feel that's pretty important. Amazingly, in versions of Motion before the Motion 5 redesign, it was also possible to hook up an external video monitor. But for mysterious reasons known only to Apple, that went away, never to come back. Anyway, back to my other big gripe about the video timeline design screw-up. Because the developers locked themselves into the mindset that you ought to be building your composition in the video timeline, they overlooked one very obvious thing. The media pane is where all your imported assets live, and you can easily drag them from the media pane to the video timeline. But if you adopt the far more sensible option of building your composition in the Layers pane, then you can't drag your assets from the media pane, because you can only have the Layers pane open or the media pane open, but not both. And of course, the rigidly locked down layouts that Apple are addicted to mean that you can't reconfigure those panes in a more sensible way. Basically, you're forced to live with and work around their design mistakes, which they will never correct. Because how could Apple ever admit that their design decisions are anything less than absolutely perfect? So anyway, that's number 1 of my 5 things. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you again soon.